provided titled Parental Consent for Abortion. This presentation will be a think aloud model of how to apply the critical questions to an article. In this presentation, I will be illustrating the thinking process involved in the critical reading of an article by stating aloud my thinking as I read each paragraph critically. This review is an effective model for you to follow for the upcoming exam. So let's begin. Having read the article through once, I now have an overview of what the author is discussing. This article revolves around the controversy over whether or not a minor should be required to get parental consent before obtaining an abortion. The author believes that minors should need parental consent. As you read each paragraph, you should annotate by underlining reasons, picking out ambiguity, and making notes in the margin regarding any of the critical questions that we've been learning about this semester. In paragraph 1, I have found 3 reasons why the author believes that minors should need parental consent for an abortion. These reasons I have underlined. Reason number 1 is that most teens are not prepared to rationally handle these decisions. It occurs to me that the author is making the descriptive assumption that all teens are alike. Perhaps some teens could make this decision. It may be reasonable to assume that 13-year-olds may not be as mature as 17-year-olds. This reason also contains an ambiguous term that I have pointed out in red. This term, most teens, is ambiguous since we don't know if the author means 51% of teens or 99% of teens, and this could make a big difference. We also have no idea where the author got this information. Reason number 2 is that parents' wisdom accumulated by their experience and study can guide their children to the best decision. With this reason, the author makes the assumption that the parents know what is best for the child. Best decision is ambiguous because we don't know how the author defines best. Is it best for the parents? The child? Is it the quickest solution? The least complicated? The cheapest? The third reason is that the need for communication is being undermined. It also occurs to me, after critically reading this paragraph, that so far all of the author's evidence is intuition. In paragraph 2, I have found 2 more reasons, an ambiguity, and the author's conclusion. In reason number 4, the author states, "A troubling example of minors' rights taken much too far is federal law that permits minors to obtain an abortion without parental consent." Parental consent is ambiguous because it is not clear if the minor needs consent from both parents, one parent, or perhaps another adult guardian or relative. In reason number 5, the author states that just because a minor wants to get an abortion doesn't mean she should get one. In this paragraph, the author also makes the assumption that having an abortion will destroy a teen's life. This is also an appeal to the reader's emotions. The first thing I notice in paragraph 3 is the phrase, "compare the situation." This phrase signals that the author may be using an analogy as evidence. The analogy that the author uses is not good evidence because the 2 things being compared, a child who is being bullied to a minor about to undergo an abortion, have almost nothing in common. This is still a reason, however, not a very good one. In paragraph 4, I have located another reason. The author states that the minor needs the mature and rational guidance a parent can provide to avoid making an impulsive decision. In this reason, the author makes the assumption that the parents will be rational and mature, and that the minor has not considered all options and reflected on the decision. parental consent requirements prevent disastrous scenes that will inevitably occur if parents discover their daughter has had an abortion without their consent. This reason, provided in paragraph 5, uses both ambiguous and emotional language. There is also no proof that this will actually happen. Again, the author is relying on intuition as evidence. Paragraph 6 contains another reason. Statutes that allow abortions to be administered without parental consent prevent girls from seeking the advice of the people who care so much for them. The author assumes that the parents are the only ones who can give advice and care the most for the teenager. In paragraph 7, the author discusses some of the value conflicts in the argument and reveals the value assumptions. When considering individual rights, the author focuses on the rights of parents to know the state of their child's well-being. It is a denial of this right, therefore, to permit minors to undergo the medical procedure of an abortion without parental consent. This shows that the author favors openness over privacy and collective responsibility over minors' individual rights. Statistics are introduced in paragraph 8. The author supports the claim that parents need to know if their child has had an abortion in case she suffers any physical or emotional side effects, with a survey in which 91% of gynecologists had treated patients with complications from legal abortions. This statistic is meant to persuade the reader that this happens almost all of the time. However, the statistics do not support that idea. The statistics prove that a large percentage, 91%, of gynecologists treat patients with complications, not that 91% of patients have complications. These are deceptive statistics. More statistics are used in paragraph 9, as well as a research study. A recent research study shows that teenage girls who have experienced abortion tend to experience depression at a much higher rate than do those who have not. The questions that come to mind include: who did the study? Who was surveyed? How many girls were included in the sample? How recent was the study? And what is the rate of depression for both girls who have had an abortion and those who have not? The author uses this study to support the causal claim that the depression is caused by the abortion. Some possible rival causes are low self-esteem, poor home life, failed relationships, etc. The author also uses more statistics in this paragraph when he refers to another study showing that 60% of women who have post-abortion trauma have suicidal thoughts. These are also deceptive statistics, as they attempt to persuade the reader that many girls have suicidal thoughts. In fact, these statistics support the notion that 60% of those with post-abortion trauma have suicidal thoughts. However, we do not have any idea how many or what percentage of girls have post-abortion trauma. This number could be quite small, and the percentage of those with suicidal thoughts even smaller. If parents are unaware that their daughter has undergone an abortion, then how can they be attentive to the warning signs for suicide and the other disorders? In this reason provided in paragraph 10, the author assumes that the parents will not be told, and if they are told, they will be helpful. Two more reasons are included in paragraph 11. Both of these attack the organization Planned Parenthood. This organization does not share the author's view on this issue. The author states that Planned Parenthood rejects the requirements for economic reasons rather than ideological ones, and Planned Parenthood is not going to support a practice that is not profitable for them. These reasons are misleading, since Planned Parenthood is a non-profit organization. Economic profit is not a part of the decision-making process of the organization. authorities to support his position. Over 70% of people surveyed were in favor of parental notification laws. This reason uses the majority as an authority. Remember, just because many people think something, that does not make it right. Also, we do not know who did the survey, who was surveyed, how many people were included in the sample, etc. Religious organizations have voiced strong support for such laws. This reason uses religious organizations as an authority. The reader must question whether religious organizations should be considered authorities in legal matters. Having critically read the article one paragraph at a time, I am now able to answer the critical questions and analyze and evaluate the argument. I have identified the issue and conclusion. I have found numerous reasons and many descriptive assumptions that link them to the author's conclusion. I have recognized ambiguity in the reasons. I have identified the value conflicts in the argument and found the author's value assumptions. The author used many types of evidence, including intuition, analogy, research studies, statistics, and authorities. For each type, I have evaluated the worth of the evidence and identified fallacies in the reasoning. I have located the author's causal claims and thought about the possible rival causes. Many of the questions I have asked myself and written in the margins focus on the information that the author has omitted, such as who did the studies he refers to, and how were the statistics obtained. Now I must consider what other reasonable conclusions could be reached based on this argument. Perhaps minors should not all be lumped together, but considered based on age and maturity once counseled by a doctor or other health professional. It might be reasonable to think that 13 to 15-year-olds should have some sort of adult support for the decision, but it might not have to be a parent. 16 and 17-year-olds may be more capable of making this decision on their own. These are my thoughts after the careful, critical reading of the article. I would recommend that you practice this process with the arguments and information that you encounter as you prepare for the upcoming exam and other important decisions that you may face in the future. Using the information that you have gathered by critically reading, you can now complete the analysis and evaluation of the author's argument by answering the critical questions. What is the issue? The controversy being addressed in this article is, should parental consent be required for a minor to get an abortion? What is the author's conclusion? The author concludes that minors should need parental consent to obtain an abortion. The next few slides outline the author's reasoning. This is what the author offers as support for the conclusion. Remember, you do not have to agree with the author or think that each reason is a strong support. At this time, you are just attempting to identify the author's argument. At a later time, you will have an opportunity to evaluate that argument. In addition, ambiguous terms are highlighted here in red. Most teens are not prepared to rationally handle this type of decision. Parents' wisdom, accumulated by their experience and study, can guide their children to the best decision. The pressing need for communication is being undermined. A troubling example of minors' rights taken much too far is federal law that permits minors to obtain an abortion without parental consent. In support of this reason, the author offers the following thoughts. Just because a minor wants to get an abortion does not mean she should get one. And this law needs to be changed before more teenagers' lives are destroyed. Consulting a parent can help teens make better decisions, such as how to react to a bully and whether or not to get an abortion. Teens need the mature and rational guidance a parent can provide to avoid making an impulsive decision. Parental consent requirements prevent disastrous scenes that will inevitably occur if parents discover their daughter has had an abortion without their consent. In these reasons, the terms most teens, best decision, parental consent, and disastrous scenes are ambiguous. Additional reasons that support the author's conclusion include Statutes that allow abortion to be administered without parental consent prevent girls from seeking the advice of the people who care so much for them. It is a denial of the parent's right to know the state of their child's well-being to permit minors to undergo the medical procedure of an abortion without parental consent. Parents need to know if their child has had an abortion in case she suffers any physical or emotional side effects. In support of this reason, the author offers the following evidence. In a survey of gynecologists, 91% had treated patients with complications from legal abortions. A recent research study shows that teenage girls who have experienced abortion tend to experience depression at a much higher rate than do those who have not. Another study shows that 60% of women who have post-abortion trauma have suicidal thoughts. Planned Parenthood is not a reliable source of information because it supports positions based on economic reasons rather than ideological ones. Over 70% of people surveyed were in favor of parental notification laws, and religious organizations have voiced strong support for such laws. In these reasons, parental consent, recent, and much higher rate are ambiguous terms. What are the value conflicts and assumptions? When looking for value conflicts, ask yourself what the author believes is important and what the opposition thinks is important. In this argument, the author values collective responsibility over individual rights, openness over privacy, and the rights of parents over the rights of minors. What are the descriptive assumptions? The descriptive assumptions are what link the author's reasons to the conclusion. The author must believe these to be true for his argument to make sense. Remember, assumptions are unstated ideas. If it is explicitly stated in the article, it is not an assumption. In this argument, the author assumes all teens are alike, assumes parents know what is best for their child, assumes that having an abortion will destroy a teen's life, assumes that parents will be rational and mature, assumes that minors will not consider all options and reflect on the decision, assumes that parents are the only ones who can give advice and care most for the teenager, and assumes that parents won't be told if it is not required, and if they are told, they will be helpful. Are there any fallacies in the reasoning? It is important to recognize fallacies or mistakes that the author makes in the logic of his reasoning. In this argument, we can find fallacies in the following instances. The author's conclusion contains emotional language used to persuade in the statement, "This law needs to be changed before more teenagers' lives are destroyed." The author uses a false analogy when he compares the situation of getting an abortion with that of a young child who is terribly distraught over a particular bully's constant taunting. These two situations have very little in common. Parental consent requirements prevent disastrous scenes that will inevitably occur if parents discover their daughter has had an abortion without their consent. This reason uses ambiguous and emotional language. Planned Parenthood rejects the requirements for economic reasons rather than ideological ones. In this reason, the author attacks an organization that is against his view. Since Planned Parenthood is a non-profit organization, the author's claim that they make decisions based on economic reasons is deceiving. Over 70% of people surveyed were in favor of parental notification laws. In this reason, the author uses the majority as an authority. This fallacy is known as an appeal to popularity, or ad populum. Many religious organizations have voiced strong support for such laws. The author uses religious organizations as an authority, which may not be appropriate in the making of laws. This fallacy is known as appeals to a questionable authority. How good is the evidence? The author uses evidence to support the claims he makes in his argument. Much of the author's argument is based on intuition, and since we do not know the author's background, we cannot judge the reliability of his thinking. The author uses a research study, but does not include when the study was done, who did the study, who was surveyed, or how many girls were in the sample. Are there rival causes? Whenever an author makes a claim about the cause of something, you should ask yourself if there are any rival causes. The author makes a causal claim that abortion causes depression when stating that a recent research study shows that teenage girls who have experienced abortion tend to experience depression at a much higher rate than do those who have not. Some rival causes for teenage depression could be low self-esteem, poor home life, or failed relationships. Are the statistics deceptive? Statistics are evidence expressed in numbers. In this argument, the author uses statistics as evidence to support his claim that parents need to know the state of their child's health, and as a reason to support the conclusion. In a survey of gynecologists, 91% had treated patients with complications from legal abortions. This proves that 91% of gynecologists have treated complications. Not 91% of patients have had complications. This statistic does not give us any information about the number of patients who have had complications from abortions. Perhaps most frightening is another study showing that 60% of women who have post-abortion trauma have suicidal thoughts. This statistic proves that 60% of those with post-abortion trauma, and we don't know how many that is, have suicidal thoughts, not 60% of those who have abortions. Over 70% of people surveyed were in favor of parental notification laws. We can't tell from this statistic how many people were surveyed and who was surveyed, so the statistic does not provide useful support for the conclusion. What significant information is omitted? The author uses statistics and studies to support the conclusion in this argument. However, important information about the statistics and studies is omitted. Some of this information includes how were the statistics obtained, who did the studies, when were the studies conducted, who was surveyed, and how large was the sample. What reasonable conclusions are possible? This critical question requires that you consider alternative conclusions based on the argument presented. For this issue, some possible alternatives include the use of counseling to determine a minor's ability to make a complicated and important decision, such as having an abortion, the realization that perhaps not all minors are the same, and that it could be reasonable to assume 13 to 15-year-olds might need some adult support, but it might not have to be a parent, and that 16 and 17-year-olds might be more capable of making their own decisions. Now that you have answered all of the critical questions, you should have a thorough understanding of the author's argument and the strengths and weaknesses of that argument. Use this process to analyze and evaluate the issues about which you are concerned and passionate.